I'm not sure why this story stayed with me for so long, maybe because it began so quietly. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the heaviest truths, and you don't realize it until later. The vampire king was alone when the call came. The palace around him was still, not the proud silence of power, but the tired kind that settles in after centuries of ruling without rest. Candles burned low along the stone walls, their light barely touching the tall windows where night pressed its face against the glass. He stood near the balcony, hands folded behind his back, listening to the city breathe far below. The phone vibrated once, then again. He almost ignored it. No one called him directly anymore unless it was urgent or dangerous or both. Ministers sent messages through layers of protection. Enemies preferred blades to words. Friends were long gone, yet something about the vibration felt wrong, almost nervous, as if the device itself hesitated to disturb him. He answered. There was silence at first, then breathing, fast, uneven, scared. Sir, a small voice said, barely holding together, they told me to call you. The king closed his eyes. That voice didn't belong in his world of marble halls and ancient bloodlines. It belonged to scraped knees, school bags, and bedtime stories. Slow down, he said softly. His voice was calm, practiced, but gentler than most people ever heard it. Tell me your name. I'm Elias, the boy whispered. My sister won't wake up. The king felt something tighten in his chest, an old ache he pretended had died centuries ago. He moved to the chair beside the fireplace and sat, as if grounding himself might keep the moment from breaking apart. Where are you right now, Elias? On the street, the boy said. It's cold, people keep walking past us. They look, but they don't stop. The fire cracked behind the king, too loud in the sudden quiet of his thoughts. He imagined the scene without trying to: wet pavement, flickering lights, a small body too still for the night air. How old is your sister? He asked. She's 6, Elias said, his voice cracked on the number. She fell, I think. She just fell and then she didn't talk anymore. The king's hand curled slowly against the armrest. For centuries, humans had feared him for his strength, his hunger, his legend. None of them knew how powerless he felt in moments like this, when distance stood between him and a child who needed help now. Listen to me carefully, he said. Are her eyes open? No, sir. Is she breathing? There was a pause filled with shuffling, the sound of fabric moving. Yes, a little. Good, the king thought, not relief, but something close enough to keep him steady. Stay with her, he said. Put your coat over her if you can. I already did. Of course you did, the king thought. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like a boy doing the only thing he knows. The king stood. Shadows moved with him, bending instinctively to his presence. He tapped a command into the phone, sending the location to his private guard, but his eyes remained distant, focused on the voice still trembling on the line. Ilias, he said, you did the right thing calling me. Are you coming? The boy asked. The question landed harder than any accusation. The king had ordered armies with a gesture, erased enemies with a word, yet this simple question carried more weight than all of it. Well, yes, he said, I'm coming. He walked through the palace corridors, long coats sweeping behind him, guards falling into step without a sound. The night outside welcomed him like an old companion, cool and sharp, alive with whispered memories. As his car cut through the streets, he kept the line open, listening to Elia's breathe, counting each second with him. Sir, the boy said suddenly, fear rising again, she feels colder. The king's jaw tightened. Streetlights blurred past the window. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling a heartbeat that did not need to beat, choosing to beat anyway. Look at me when I arrive, he told the boy. No matter what happens, you are not alone anymore. The car slowed. The king stepped out into the night, rain misting the air, and saw a small shape on the pavement ahead. A boy knelt beside her, too thin for the darkness around him, holding a phone with shaking hands. And for the first time in centuries, the vampire king felt afraid, not of what he was about to face, but of being too late. He took one step forward. Then he saw the girl's face. He remembered thinking later that moments like this never arrive with thunder. They arrive quietly, already breaking your heart before you realize it. The vampire king knelt beside them without hesitation. The stone street was cold and wet, but he didn't seem to notice. His long coat spread across the ground as he leaned closer to the girl, his movements slow and deliberate as if rushing might frighten her back into silence. Elias looked up at him, eyes wide, searching his face for proof that help had truly come. "Oh, you did well," the king said, meeting the boy's gaze first. "You stayed, that takes courage." Elias nodded, though his hands still shook. "She didn't answer me," he whispered. "I kept talking so she wouldn't feel alone." Something in the king's expression softened, a crack in the armor centuries had built. He placed two fingers gently against the girl's neck, not to feed, not to claim, but to listen. Her pulse was there, faint but stubborn, like a promise refusing to disappear. "She's holding on," he said quietly, "just like you are." The street around them felt suspended, as if the city had paused out of respect. People lingered at a distance now, pretending not to stare, pretending they hadn't walked past minutes earlier. The king was aware of them, but he did not look up. His world had narrowed to the child on the ground and the brother guarding her with everything he had. He slipped off his gloves and brushed a hand across the girl's forehead. Her skin was cold, too cold for a living child, and it stirred a memory he rarely allowed himself to touch. Long ago, before crowns and shadows, he had held someone the same way, whispering reassurances that came too late. "Not again," he thought. "Oh, Elias," he said gently, "has your sister been sick recently?" The boy shook his head. "She just gets tired. Mom says she's strong, just small." The king glanced at the girl's lips, pale, tinged with blue. Exhaustion alone did not do this. Something deeper was stealing her warmth, and time was no longer a friend. The sirens wailed somewhere far away, delayed by traffic and indifference. His guard stood ready behind him, tense but silent, trusting his judgment without question. The king made a decision that no council would have approved, no law would have permitted. He leaned closer to the girl, shielding her from curious eyes. His thumb pressed lightly against her wrist, and he closed his own eyes, listening not just with senses, but with something older. He felt her fear, not sharp, but fading, like a light struggling to stay on. "Stay with us," he murmured, a command and a plea woven together. "Your brother still needs you." Elias watched, breath held, as the king's eyes darkened briefly, not with hunger, but with focus. The air around them seemed to thicken, humming with restrained power. Oh, the girl's fingers twitched. Oh, Elias gasped. She moved. The king did not answer. His face had gone still, solemn, as if he were standing at the edge of a line he swore never to cross again. Because to save her, he would have to reveal a part of himself no one was meant to see. And once he did, there would be no turning back. There are moments when kindness asks for a price before it shows you the result. This was one of those moments, and the vampire king knew it the instant he felt the choice settle inside him. He drew a slow breath that did not need air, steadying himself. The world around him faded to a dull hush, as if the night itself leaned closer to listen. His guards shifted uneasily behind him, sensing the shift in his presence, the quiet warning in the air. "Elias," the king said without opening his eyes, "I need you to do something very important for me." The boy straightened immediately. Fear was still there, but so was trust, fragile and brave. "Okay," he said. "Keep your eyes on your sister," the king continued. "Talk to her, tell her something she loves." Elias swallowed. "She likes stars," he said softly. "She says they're holes in the sky where light escapes." The king felt a sharp ache at the innocence of it. "Then tell her about the stars." As the boy began to speak, his small voice weaving familiar comfort into the cold air, the king pressed his palm fully against the girl's wrist. Beneath his skin, ancient power stirred, careful and restrained, nothing like the violence legends spoke of. This was not feeding. This was lending. Warmth flowed first, subtle as a breath, moving from him into her like a shared secret. Her pulse responded, faint at first, then steadier, as if remembering what it was meant to do. The king's jaw tightened. Every second he held this connection cost him something he guarded fiercely. Memories surfaced uninvited. A child's laugh in another century, a small hand slipping from his grasp, the promise he made to never play with human lives again, no matter how pure the intention. Sir, Ilias whispered, panic returning. She's breathing different. The king opened his eyes. The girl's chest rose a little more evenly now, but her face remained pale, caught between worlds. He knew this edge well. Linger too long and she would drift away. Push too hard and the balance would break. Oh, she's fighting, he said. That's a good sign. Rain began to fall in earnest, soft at first, then heavier, tapping against the pavement and the king's shoulders. One of the guards stepped forward instinctively with an umbrella, but the king shook his head. Let the rain fall. Let it be real. A flicker of warmth spread beneath his hand, stronger this time. Color returned slowly to the girl's lips, so faint it could be missed by anyone not watching closely. The king felt it like a tug deep in his chest, a pull toward something dangerous and human. "The stars don't disappear," Elias said, voice trembling as he spoke to his sister. "Even when you can't see them, they're still there." The girl's fingers curled just slightly around the edge of the coat covering her. The movement was small, but it landed like thunder. Elias let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob. "She heard me." "Oh, yes," the king thought, "she did." But with that movement came a sharp jolt through him, a warning from his own body. The energy he was sharing was awakening something else in the girl, something hidden and fragile. Saving her life might change it forever. The king withdrew his hand abruptly, breaking the connection. The sudden emptiness left him unsteady, his balance shifting as he rose to one knee. The sirens were closer now, echoing down the street. "Will she be okay?" Elias asked, looking up at him with absolute faith. The vampire king met the boy's eyes, knowing the truth was no longer simple. "She will live," he said carefully, "but what she becomes after tonight, that I don't yet know." And as the first ambulance lights spilled across the wet pavement, the king realized this night had already bound their fates together in ways none of them could escape later. People would talk about flashing lights and sirens, about how help finally arrived. But what stayed with me was the silence between those sounds, the kind where everything important is decided. The ambulance doors swung open, spilling white light onto the street. Paramedics moved quickly, practiced, and focused, their voices calm in a way that tried to convince everyone else to stay calm too. They lifted the girl gently onto a stretcher, wrapping her in warmth, checking monitors that beeped with cautious optimism. Elias refused to let go of her hand. "You can ride with us," one of them said kindly, crouching to his level. "We'll take care of her." The boy looked back at the vampire king, eyes searching again, as if asking permission to believe this wasn't the end. The king nodded once, slow and certain. "Go with her," he said. "That's where you belong." As the doors closed, the king remained kneeling on the street. Rain streaked down his hair and coat, washing away the sharp edges of his presence. His guards watched him carefully now, not with fear but concern. They had seen him face war and betrayal without flinching. They had never seen him like this. "Sir," one of them said quietly, "the council will demand answers." The king stood at last, the movement measured, heavy. "They can wait." His gaze followed the ambulance as it pulled away, lights fading into the maze of streets. Something inside him felt unfinished, like a sentence cut short. He could still feel the girl's pulse under his fingers, the echo of it lingering where his power had touched her. "Find out where they're taking her," he said, "and who they are." "Oh yes, sire." The palace felt colder when he returned, emptier somehow. The fire had burned low, leaving only embers and shadows. He removed his coat slowly, as if the weight of the night clung to it, then sat alone in the quiet hall. Memories pressed in again, sharper now. Every time he had stepped in to save a human life, the consequences followed like a shadow. Some were grateful, some were afraid, some changed in ways no one could predict. He wondered what the girl would dream of, lying in a hospital bed, warmth returning to her veins. He wondered if she would remember his face, his voice, or only the feeling of not being alone anymore. Hours passed. Near dawn, a message arrived from his guard. She stabilized, it read, but there is something else. The king's hand tightened around the phone. What's something else? A pause, then her body temperature rose faster than expected. Doctors can't explain it. And the boy says she asked if the man from the night was still watching the stars with her. Well, the king closed his eyes. He had hoped to leave quietly, to be nothing more than a passing shadow in their lives. But hope, he knew too well, was a dangerous thing. Because if the girl remembered him, if she had carried even a fragment of what he was into the light of day, then this story was no longer about a rescue. It was about a bond that refused to fathom our nights when immortality feels less like a gift and more like a long memory you can never put down. This was one of those nights. The vampire king did not sleep. He stood by the tall window as dawn thinned the darkness, watching the city soften into pale blues and grays. Humans were waking, stretching into another ordinary day, unaware that something ancient had bent itself around a small heartbeat to keep it alive. By the time the sun fully rose, he had already decided. The hospital was quiet in the early morning hours. Machines hummed softly and the smell of antiseptic clung to the air. No one noticed the tall man in the long coat as he walked its corridors, his presence muted, unremarkable, as if the building itself agreed to look past him. Elias sat in a chair beside the bed, feet dangling, eyes heavy but stubbornly open. He looked up when the king entered, surprise flashing across his face before relief replaced it. "Oh, you came back," he whispered. The king inclined his head. "I said I would." The girl lay still beneath white sheets, color returned to her cheeks, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. She looked smaller here, less like a mystery of the night and more like a child who should have been asleep in her own bed. The king approached slowly. "How is she?" "The doctor says she's okay," Elias said. "They don't know why she woke up. She asked for water, then she asked about you." The king's gaze settled on the girl's face. "What did you tell her?" Elias hesitated. "I said you were a friend." A quiet warmth spread through the king's chest, quickly followed by unease. Friend was a word he had not worn in a very long time. As if summoned by the sound of their voices, the girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening when they found him. She did not scream, she did not pull away. She simply watched him, calm and curious, as if she had known him long before the street, before the cold. "Oh, you're the night man," she said softly. Elias froze. The king felt the room tilt just slightly. "Why do you call me that?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "Because you felt like night," she replied, "but not the scary kind, the kind that keeps secrets." The king lowered himself to one knee beside the bed. "Do you feel strange?" he asked, "different from before?" The girl considered this. "I feel warm," she said, "and when I close my eyes, I see stars moving, not falling, moving like they're alive." The words settled heavy in the air. The change had begun, subtle but undeniable. Not a curse, not a transformation, but a thread tying her awareness to something beyond her years. The king straightened slowly. He could not undo what he had done. He could only decide what came next. "Elias," he said quietly, "does your family have anyone else?" The boy shook his head. "It's just us. Mom works a lot." The king nodded. "Then listen to me carefully. What I did last night saved your sister, but it also means she will need protection. Not from monsters in stories, but from fear, from questions, from people who would not understand." Elias' eyes widened. "Are you saying we're in danger?" "Not yet," the king replied, "but the world notices what it cannot explain." The girl reached out suddenly and took his finger in her small hand. Her grip was gentle, steady, and far warmer than it should have been. "Well, will you come back?" she asked. The king looked at their joined hands, at the fragile trust in her eyes, and felt the full weight of the promise pressing against his chest. "Oh, yes," he said at last, "but when I do, everything will change." And somewhere deep within him, he knew the final choice was still waiting. Some endings do not close a door. They leave it slightly open, just enough to let light and responsibility enter together. Well, the vampire king kept his promise. He did not return as a shadow in the night, nor as a figure whispered about in fear. He returned quietly, through arrangements no one questioned and protection no one could trace. Elias and his sister moved to a safer place, closer to schools and parks and ordinary sounds that helped wounds heal. Their mother never learned the full truth, only that help had arrived when she could not, and that kindness sometimes wears unfamiliar faces. The girl grew stronger with each passing day. The doctors called it recovery. The king called it balance. The warmth he had given her settled into something gentle, a heightened awareness rather than a burden. She could feel when storms were coming. She noticed sadness in people before words revealed it, but she remained human, fully and beautifully so. The king visited rarely, always at dusk, always briefly. He never stayed long enough to become a habit. When he came, he listened more than he spoke. He taught Elias small things, how to stand your ground without raising your voice, how courage often looks like patience. To the girl, he spoke of stars and night skies, reminding her that light does not need to be loud to be powerful. Once she asked him why he helped them. The king took a long moment before answering. "Because someone once needed help," he said, "and I was too afraid of the cost." Well, she nodded as if she understood, and maybe she did. Time moved forward as it always does. Elias grew taller. His sister laughed more easily. The fear of that night loosened its grip, becoming a story they told softly, the kind that reminds you how close loss can come and how quietly it can be turned away. One evening, as the city lights blinked on below them, the king prepared to leave. The girl hugged him, small arms wrapping around a figure the world believed incapable of such warmth. "You're not scary at all," she said. "You're just lonely." The words struck deeper than any blade ever had. The king knelt before them, meeting their eyes. "Remember this," he said. "Power is not proven by how much you can take, but by how much you choose not to." With that, he stepped back into the night, not vanishing, but walking away like any other man carrying a quiet truth. Far above, stars watched in their patient silence. And for the first time in centuries, the vampire king felt something new take root where emptiness once lived. Not hunger, not regret, a hope. Well, the story did not end there. It simply began living.